I absolutely know. There is no question I did a bad thing. Unprofessional.
So the report that's been released today looks into the circumstances surrounding the departure of Philip Schofield from this morning, earlier this year. And already it's being called a whitewash because essentially what the author of this report, who's a very senior barrister, is saying is that the management at ITV had no idea what was happening, or at least couldn't get to the bottom of what was happening. And they basically were told by both Philip and the much younger runner that essentially nothing was going on. And it took the admission earlier this year before any real action could be taken, at which point Philip Schofield stood down anyway. One of the most interesting elements of this study is the fact that both Philip and the much younger runner both declined to take part in the report. Apparently, the runner said that they wanted to get on with their lives. They didn't want to dwell on this any longer. And Philip Schofield said his mental health was in such a terrible state that he didn't want to make himself feel any more ill by taking part. That's quite a shocking state of affairs when you think about it. And also, some people might say it adds to the sense that this report isn't quite what it could or should be, because without testimony from the two people at the center of it, it does feel like there's a chunk of evidence which is missing. Now, people are saying this is a whitewash because they can't believe that management didn't know something was going on, or indeed that people much further down the food chain at ITV didn't know what was happening. And the only person who knew that something was going on was a junior member of staff, nobody else. Now, a lot of people will find that hard to believe, but even if we believe that only one person knew about this, that one person didn't feel that they were able to convey what they knew further up the food chain. And what this report is saying is that whether it's one person or 100 people, you should be able to report this to your bosses if you feel it's inappropriate. So it's not an entirely wasted report, although one or two people at ITV have already been saying that it has been a waste of time. But if something good comes out of this, then that's what matters, really. I think that what they're recommending now is that ITV make it clear to their talent what boundaries they have to stay within in terms of relationships and appropriate and, more importantly, inappropriate behaviour.
He worked at the show for a bit. We became mates. And then one day, something happened that just changed it. And that's the moment, that's the moment I look back on.
Yeah, you have someone who's very famous, very powerful, who could have been seen to have coerced someone much younger and much more influential into doing something that perhaps they might not ordinarily have done. That is something that Philip Schofield has always maintained did not happen. He's been asked before, did he feel like he groomed this runner? And he's vehemently denied that. The point is, this is all about perception, and ITV can't be seen as a big corporation to be allowing this sort of thing to go on without at least attempting to prevent it. And there's been a series of measures suggested as part of this report, which will hopefully stem any future behaviour of this kind. But it's, generally speaking, a good report. I think that it seems quite thorough. I think something like 48 people were interviewed, some anonymously, some on the record with their names. One of the more interesting aspects of this report is not so much what's in it, but what isn't in it. And I think one of the things which is missing is any reference to toxic behavior. Now, toxic behavior was something that was flagged around the time of Philip's departure as a real problem on This Morning. It was something which was seen as creating an environment where if something did happen that was inappropriate, people didn't feel like they could report it. And the point is that this report doesn't mention toxic behavior. What's interesting is that ITV mention toxic behavior by saying it doesn't feature in the report, and they're quite right. It doesn't, but they're taking that to mean that, well, this is evidence that toxic behavior just didn't exist at ITV. I think a lot of people will sort of say that that is a very strong interpretation, and also the very fact that this report suggests that people do feel like they can't necessarily speak up suggests that, well, if it's not a toxic atmosphere, it isn't necessarily quite where it should be.